Nothing in your education or experience can have prepared you for this film.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Mask of the Slasher. We're at episode 22 and we have decided to do another off the subject because it seems to be fairly popular with the last one with Thriller.
Yeah.
So we thought, why not? Plus this is a movie that I wanted to talk about eventually. I just didn't know quite how to wedge it in to the horror.
Oh, we're wedging it.
We're wedging it like a big old wedgie.
It right in
yes.
there.
Like a big old cheese wedge.
A big one.
The movie that I want to talk about was something that I was introduced to, and it was another one of those what the am I watching situations, but it was in a good way. And I have to say that at the time, I'm pretty sure we did partake in some recreational products.
Yes.
And so, which is definitely... It makes it a little bit more interesting. Definitely. The movie we're going to talk about is The Holy Mountain, which was directed, produced, written, everything. Costuming, some composing, all that stuff.
Yards.
Yeah. By Mr. Alejandro Jodorowsky, who is still alive today, by the way.
Yeah.
I think he's like 90 now.
Mm.
He's on my Facebook. He pops up from time to time. It's kind of cool. Anyway, so yeah, The Holy Mountain. This movie is, it's a lot.
Yes.
It's a lot. And we have actually kind of put it off to do this video because, we knew we'd have to rewatch the movie.
Yeah.
And it just takes a lot of brain power.
Yeah.
And we don't always have all that. So but I thought with the holiest of days coming upon us on Sunday, it was appropriate.
Right.
A couple things that we noticed in the notes beforehand was...
Yeah. One thing I noticed right off the bat in the intro was there was like some throat singing happening. And it immediately made me think of the scene on Salusa Secundus in the most recent version of Dune. If you know Jodorowsky, you know that he tried to make an adaptation of Dune at one point. So I was just kind of wondering if Villeneuve was kind of giving us a throwback to Jodorowsky or kind of a little nod to Jodorowsky with that scene in Dune. Who knows? Just speculation on my part, but I thought it was interesting.
Or the fact that just throat singing is freaking weird.
Yeah.
it definitely sets a mood.
It does.
It does. The other thing is that Jodorowsky had put out a movie prior to this called El Topo. And apparently George Harrison and John Lennon, of the Beatles, they both really liked this movie. So John Lennon and Yoko Ono, they threw down some cash money for the production of this movie.
Yeah.
Not a lot. I'm gonna go $5-10 possibly. I don't know.
So just think, folks, if you bought some Beatles records back in the day, you may have helped finance this movie.
You could have. I mean, it definitely wasn't Yoko's albums. It's rough. So this movie starts off with a man who looks like Jesus Christ.
Yes.
Laying on the ground, just kind of out of it, taking a wee on himself.
Pissing himself,
yeah.
Flies all over his face at one point.
It was,
that's a lot.
It's a hot movie.
You're already like, oh, this is already a lot going on.
2 seconds in. Like,
here we go.
Yeah. But you're like, okay, let's see how it goes from there. The movie basically is starting off with Jesus Christ, who they do not say that in any way, but he is being exploited.
Yes.
From I mean, there's so many different things.
Well, yeah, and there's even a sign that says Christ's for sale at one
Yeah,
point.
yeah,
And it's sort of this dystopian version of Mexico.
yes.
We should probably mention that
Oh
as
yeah,
well.
yeah, it's a good
Just
point.
for the fact that there's like all these really atrocious things going on, and there's like these white tourists running around
With sombreros
taking
on.
video and photographing everything that's happening.
He just keeps getting taken advantage of and just treated like garbage.
So there's this tower basically, and a piece of and gold is coming down on this hook, and Jesus, or we assume this character that is Jesus-like, hops on this hook, gets towed up into this tower where this room of sort of a rainbow room, I guess you'd say.
A very rainbow room.
Yeah. There he meets the alchemist, who is played by Jodorowsky himself.
Yes, and half-shaved head.
Yes.
He's got a very interesting outfit.
Yeah.
Enter it here.
Yes.
And the alchemist is basically like, you're kind of in a tough situation here. Let me see if I can help you out a little bit. And from there, it keeps going down a weird ass rabbit hole.
Yes, it does.
Jesus. We'll just go with Jesus because that's who he looks like. That's who he's supposed to look like.
It's kind of.
He's later referred to as the thief.
Yeah.
But he is Jesus. He poops in a container.
Yeah.
And then they bake it down
and turn it into gold.
Gold.
Alchemy was kind of a proto-science, and that was one of the things that they tried to do, not with feces, but with they were trying to turn like regular metal into gold, like lead, for example. They were trying to turn lead into gold, and also they were kind of alchemists were kind of interested in finding like an elixir of mortality or immortality, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it does kind of play into what alchemy was, or at least what we know of it.
Yeah, he's just like, okay, you can be gold and all that, and I guess it kind of ties back to that big gold hook and whatever. It was very symbolic. A lot of symbolism in this.
That's one thing about this movie is that it kind of, in the beginning, it kind of smashes you over the head with all this constant symbolism. It's just throwing all this symbolism at you.
Yeah.
And so then by the time it starts to kind of get a little more coherent, your brain's already jelly.
Yes.
So I kind of wish I had taken some notes as well, because I felt like I'd seen it before, but still it'd been a long time, and I kind of felt like, wow, by the time it kind of starts to make a little more sense, then your brain's already mush because you've just been smacked over the head with all these colors and all these images and all these symbols, and it's just it's a lot.
And there isn't a lot of spoken lines in general. I mean, a lot of them are poorly dubbed.
Right.
If there is any, it's very, very limited script. There's mumbling going on and just noises.
Yeah, and I read that he tried to cut out as much dialogue as he could for some reason. So.
Well, I think it makes you have to look at the symbolism and understand it, because if you have everything explained to you, you're not going to be able to interpret it correctly.
Right.
So I think that's what it comes down to, and I appreciated that because it definitely makes you think, and sometimes we've got to use the big noodle,
right?
And not have everything handed to us.
Right.
So I did appreciate it. And the symbolism doesn't stop at that point. It continues through the rest of the movie, and you do have to kind of put the puzzle pieces together.
Yeah.
At one point, the alchemist is kind of like, I think he's the missing key to what's happening, and he's trying to put things together because of the whole alchemy portion of this, and figuring out the meaning of life and how things can be, done better, and how we can all be happier. And so at that point, they start to introduce what they refer to as the most powerful people in the world. And
they all have a different planet associated with them.
Yes. There is, I'm just going to kind of give you like a shortcut of each thing, some cliff notes, because you got to see these poor. I can't explain it and have you go, oh, that sounds
Yeah,
good.
it's sort of
you
like
know?
each of the characters has a little vignette to go with, what they're all kind of explain to you what
Yeah.
they're all about. So they each have a name and a planet associated with them, and I'll
Yeah.
let Krista kind of go
So
through the rest of it here.
Venus,
The cliff notes.
which makes sense, is a planet of beauty, where that is what is the most important thing. Um, I should back up a little bit on this actually, because this movie is exploitation through and through,
Mhm.
because Jesus was being exploited in the beginning.
Yes.
And that's what each of these planets they're manufacturing or whatever, they're producing. That's what they're doing, is exploiting each one of these things. So now that I've said that, so Venus is exploiting beauty. So putting out that you need to be beautiful, you can have facelifts and all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Creating masks that people could wear for the rest of their lives to make them
Yes.
look however they wanted.
Yeah, it was a lot, but it's what still goes on today, even more so. So the next one was Mars, and this was exploitation of war and weapons.
Right.
They basically sell and create weapons, and um, I even thought this was interesting that they mentioned that they have made a drug that causes delusions of grandeur, and I was like, really, that's interesting and fitting.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing I thought was interesting about Mars, it was a female lead, and she happened to be a lesbian.
Yeah.
And so it's just different from what you would anticipate, because usually war and weapons is, a masculine thing.
Yeah, you're expecting Rambo.
Yeah, exactly. And she still dresses masculine. Like you would anticipate. That's what society wants us to anticipate.
Right.
Next one was Jupiter, and they exploited sex. This one, I have to say, is probably the most comical, in my opinion, out of all of the little segments. They make art, and it is very sexualized.
Yes.
And hilarious.
Yeah.
Just an example, they make prints out of people's ass cheeks.
Yeah.
Where they just dip their ass in paint and then sit on the paper.
Yep.
And oh my gosh, but that's nothing in comparison to the rest of the art. So you've definitely got to check that out, because it's funny and comical, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
After that one is Saturn, and this one is it's kind of sad in a sense, but it was basically the exploitation of children's happiness and joy. They apparently were studying along with the government what countries and who they would be at war with in the future. They would create toys for the children and train them to hate whoever it was in the future. It was basically just prepping kids to, and it's basically stating, like how parents, teach their kids the future of hate, because there is, even in the beginning of the movie, there is, Nazi symbolism and that kind of thing. So that's what that was. And so it sucks, but it's very truthful. So next is Uranus. It never gets old. And this one was a little weirder and somewhat comical, but it's a couple that kind of lives in shambles and a toilet that is way too tall.
Yeah.
Like the bowl is up here, and then there's like a whole plumbing tube going down. It's really weird. The gentleman is the financial advisor for the president. And so he lives in shambles. Then he goes and he has to give this report to the president and is all frantic about it. And he tells the president, okay, well, 4 million people have to die in order for us to be able to continue to live these amazing lives. And of course, the president is living in laps of luxury.
Right.
And this man is living in squalor, but yet he still continues to do this job and say, yes, it's okay for 4 million people to die.
Right.
So that one, it's, I think it's just the exploitation of people
Yeah.
in general, just society.
Mm-hmm.
Neptune is the chief of police,
Yeah.
and it's just exploitation of power,
Right.
as you would anticipate. And then Pluto is an architect. This one, I don't know, it kind of reminded me of the whole Candyman thing,
Mm-hmm.
because it was talking about, he had built basically a mass housing for the poor, but gave them everything that they needed, but just doesn't see how they still need that stuff. So they don't need plumbing or electricity or anything. That's just a place where they're supposed to sleep, and then they're supposed to go back to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's introducing new housing, and they're all coffins.
Right.
And it's just, there's some symbolism for you right there, just working you to death.
Yep.
That's where that comes all together. And then they meet up.
Right.
They're like, hey, what's going down?
Yeah.
Let's have a party,
right.
and burn all of our money.
Burn all their money.
Yeah. Which I'm like, it didn't really seem like that much that was on the table,
No.
but this was 1973.
Exactly.
So it was stacks of cash
that
they all dumped out and burned. And it was kind of funny because Jesus, the thief, was, he kind of
trying to pocket some of it. Yeah.
It was like, well, that's pretty funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
And also very symbolic.
Yes.
So anyway, they go to seek out the holy mountain.
Yeah, they're kind of on this quest or pilgrimage, and they're kind of dressed like pilgrims, as
Yeah,
kind of like exaggerated versions of like what like you think of as pilgrim garb, sort of.
Yeah, with those sweet David Bowie heels.
Yes,
those boots.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, all right, Ziggy.
They sort of go through, they're on their way up the mountain to find these 9 immortal masters, I believe it is. Mm-hmm. And along the way, they go through all these different rituals, sort of...
wackadoo.
Yeah, sort of just pretty far out
Can't
stuff.
Even remember them at this
I don't even want to go into all that because it's a lot. And then, as they're climbing towards the top, they sort of start to see these hallucinations or visions that kind of have to do with their fears, and some of those are pretty weird too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then they're like, all right, we're ending this essentially. Yeah. And the Alchemist, it made everybody think that he got his head cut off, because he was like, all right, you guys all figured this out.
Yep.
Cut my head off.
Yeah, it's basically, you don't need me anymore.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
But then, surprise, there he was.
Yes.
He's the alchemist.
And the immortals were actually dummies.
Yes.
So it's kind of interesting. Like, what was your take on that? Because I was trying to figure out, was he trying to say that this is all bullshit and you don't need to go you should face reality instead of going on these quests for enlightenment that aren't real? What was your take on it?
I think that was a big part of it, and I think that portion of it made you question it, and then they go to the next portion of it where he breaks, what is it called, the fourth wall. Yeah. And they zoom out and you could see the whole crew and whatever, and he says, goodbye to the holy mountain, real life awaits us.
Yes.
So it was the dummies being there. Yes, I think it was a thing where, that you don't need this.
Yeah.
You don't need this. And you don't need materialistic things. You don't need to exploit people. You don't need money and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And you don't need to over-sexualize everything either. But that's it. Unfortunately, I mean, that was 1973.
Not much has changed, evidently, because
it's gotten worse, actually.
Because you see these things, and obviously, they're exaggerations. Yes, but still, it's all things that are happening today.
Yeah, absolutely.
As far as people being exploited, things being over-sexualized,
mm-hmm.
All that stuff is still going on to this day.
The obsession of beauty.
Yes.
And all that. I think that's what it was saying, and then when they zoomed out, it was like a snap into reality for everybody. And that's why he looks at the camera and he says that to everybody. And so they all just get up and walk away, and they flip the table over that they were sitting at, just like screw this table. This is not real.
Yeah.
And I think it was very eye-opening. And I think if the movie didn't have such strange imagery and that kind of thing, it could be a message a lot of people could understand and get something out of.
Yeah.
But because it's such an extreme movie and it has so much in it that could possibly upset people.
Oh, yeah.
Heads up.
Yeah.
No kids
around
when watching this.
No.
But I think that's what it really comes down to. And I think I wish that more people could get something out of this. But it has taken me a couple times to fully grasp it. And even today, after I've seen it, I think at least 4 times now.
Yeah.
And I had to write notes.
Well, yeah, because it's such overload.
It is.
It's kind of it's so much overload especially at the beginning.
Yeah.
And by the time you get to the end, it's kind of hard to really decide or interpret what he was getting at. For me, it's what we're talking about, that you don't need this quest for immortality. You don't need all these materialistic things. You don't need to exploit human rights,
And you don't need religion.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I to me, that's what it's about.
Yeah.
And I think we're both on the same wavelength on that. But it's hard to get to that point because it's just so much to take in.
And it's long. It's almost 2 hours long. Definitely some stuff could have been chopped down a little bit, not necessarily taken out.
Right.
But there's just some parts that are a little longer running and don't need to be.
Could have been shortened. Yeah, for sure.
And there's it's 1973. It's in a different country. So keep that in mind when you're watching it and you get offended by something in it, which I won't explain what that is right now. But keep it in mind because if you've seen Cannibal Holocaust, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you've seen Solo, you'll know what I'm talking about. It was just a different time.
Right.
But the irony of it, the fact that it was a different time and all of that could be in this movie, and yet the message is still exactly the same. So things will never change.
Right.
Unfortunately.
It seems that way.
So, but it was also a way to find humor and, in such bold symbolism. It was a way to be like, look at how stupid we are for doing all this stuff. So if you like movies that have a lot of symbolism, make you think, are really trippy. Definitely some. There was some LSD used during the making of this.
There's references to it as well. That's what
that guy
has references to drugs in the movie
LSD
as well.
Yeah, because it definitely was happening.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah, you can't come up with that weird stuff and it just be like, oh yeah, my fifth grader came up with this.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing. If you want to just experience it and take a trip, you can watch it that way.
Yeah.
Or you can kind of do what we did this time around, is really look for the meaning behind it too.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's definitely different facets to this movie, which also makes it very interesting to me.
Absolutely.
Because you can look at it any number of ways, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then at the end of this, I'd like to just say a little something here. Recently, I do go onto other sites and Instagram pages and whatever, when something has been posted and there's comments, because I'd like to see what other people like and what people talk about, because it's called research, folks.
Yeah.
Look it up. Recently, I saw somebody say something along the lines of the movie Poor Things, which is a fantastic movie, by the way. Josh did not have any interest in seeing this movie, but I did because I like Emma Stone. But also, it was a damn good movie. Anyway, this guy said, "I don't think there's anything weirder than this movie," and I'm sitting there thinking about what we're about to put up and talk about. And I was in the middle of watching when this conversation between him and I are going back and forth, where he's comparing Poor Things and Pink Flamingos to being the weirdest thing you have ever seen. I want to say that this is by far one of the weirdest things I have ever watched in my life. We will put up more because there's definitely more out there.
We've got some more in mind for sure.
Yes. But I want to. That person said back to me, well, why don't you rank how weird these movies are that I had listed? And I said, no, because that's up to your interpretation, and you need to do your homework and need to look outside of the box, outside of what is so readily available to everybody, because I can go online and find pink flamingos in a second. Yeah. And obviously Poor Things is everywhere.
This is not a knock on John Waters. We love John Waters.
No, we love John Waters.
But
that's not the weirdest thing out there.
Exactly. Definitely good gateway weird, I think.
It is, gateway weird. There you go. There you go. I mean, we thought that when we put up the video for Thriller, we didn't anticipate that would be so popular, and it has by far our most popular video at this point. Yes. And I'm ecstatic about it because I'm hoping that new people get to see this movie. But that's what we're also hoping with this one too. You just have to have some patience. Maybe watch it a couple times. Sober, not sober, whatever you want to do. You do you, boo. Yeah. But give it a chance. But don't shut yourself off from what else can be out there just because you think something is the weirdest. Yeah. Not everything is quote unquote weird. Right. It's up to your interpretation of it. So it's art. Yes. Look it up. Yeah. Anyway, that's it for us. Yes. We'll be back next week. Yes. Bye. Bye.